Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Friday edition, Friday, January 31st edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, joined in here in the WellPoint studios, and look, it's not an empty chair today. No. She's back, and she didn't actually blow me off.
No, I was tempted, but I would never do that. I would never really do it.
Jomarie Buckley from the town of Tewksbury, a very active member in Tewksbury. You founded the organization Tewksbury Together,
yes,
which we may talk a little bit about today, because I want to talk about non-government organizations.
Okay.
Which yours isn't. But
correct. As a nonprofit, we're private.
A real nonprofit.
Correct.
As opposed to the political action committees.
Correct. No, truly nonprofit. Truly nonprofit.
Awesome. But we want to talk. We're going to talk about Tewksbury. Obviously, the budget is just out. First one under town manager John Curran.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that. You've done an in-depth dive in that, and that's kind of your area of focus.
Yeah.
Right, being on the economic development committee
and the finance
committee. So we'll talk about that, and then I'm going to see if I can get you into some more trouble.
Let's do it.
Certainly weren't shy about letting your opinions out.
Exactly.
Last time we chatted, when you were, you broke the news here that a second sitting member of the Board of Selectmen was not going to be running for re-election after one of them stepped down to
both incumbents.
Duties. Two incumbents. You then wrote a follow-up story, InsideLowell.com. Look at it. It's about Mark Kratman saying he's going to not seek re-election. But he did say, I went back and watched the meeting, he did leave the door open for a return.
He'll be back.
In the future.
He'll absolutely be
100%.
back. I would be shocked unless, because he said it was for health reasons. We all know it's because he has this looming trial. Assuming that gets settled out, I would fully expect he's going to be back on the ticket as soon as he can be.
All right. Yeah. So we'll be watching for that. Lots more to talk about with Jomarie. Before we get to it, let me just quickly thank our Inside Lowell Daily Pulse sponsors. Of course, Real Estate Ray Booten, licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both of those states as well. If you're looking to buy or sell a home or a commercial property, Real Estate Ray Booten is your man. Find him online at realestaterayBooten.com. He's got some listings on his website now. He's got some new ones coming up too. So check back every few days with Real Estate Ray if you are in the market. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. We're coming to you from the WellPoint studios. WellPoint is the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. We thank Ray. We thank our friends at WellPoint. We got a bunch of other sponsors to thank as well. We'll do that in a few minutes, but let's get right to it. All right. So you've done your deep dive into the budget, Jomarie.
No surprises.
No surprises.
Spoiler alert.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
So I think we need to preface this by saying this was John Curran's first budget presentation, but this is not this is not his first budget.
And that's what I was going to say. This is Richard's.
This is Richard's final budget.
Right? Okay.
Well, he did it. I mean, and John thanked him at the beginning of the presentation at the select board on the 28th. If you want to watch it, if you need help falling asleep, I definitely recommend it. I was listening to it while driving, which was dangerous.
Those budget hearings aren't as riveting as the
Tewksbury podcasts. Oh my gosh, no. But John Curran said at the beginning of it that Richard did all the work. He was the one who got all the department heads' information. He was the one who put the budget together. Looking at it, it's very much a Richard Montori budget. I would say this was his kind of grand finale when it comes to, Tewksbury Finance. This was Richard's budget. John was presenting it. And he did present it slightly different. He did have some different kind of charts and graphs that Richard wouldn't normally use. But it's the same presentation. You know what I mean? And if anyone took the time to listen to it, then they would understand kind of municipal finance a little bit better, because he did go into kind of, these are our expenses, these are our revenues, this is what's changed. And there was no surprises. But I do think if you read between the lines of the budget and you read between the lines of some of what he was saying, as well as as usual, I know you love it when I say this, the script was written, the right questions were asked at the end of it to prompt the right responses for the community to hear what we're supposed to have them hear. There's going to be, all of the towns, it's not just Tewksbury, but we really need to wake up. We in the community, we as everyday residents, we as the taxpayers of Massachusetts and as in the United States need to wake up, because we are going to get into trouble quickly if we think that we can just kind of keep living paycheck to paycheck and skating through this world. We need to pay attention. And I say it, and I used to say it, this is important stuff. It's a $144 million budget that the town was just presented with. And I would be shocked if more than 1,000 residents ever take the time to read it or understand it. And we have over 20,000 residents in our town. So
let me just push back on that, because I've long believed that.
Yeah.
And one of the elected officials that I admire the most, former State Senator 𝐉𝐨𝐞 𝐌𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐞 from Lowell, who became chairman of Ways and Means in the Senate. When he walked away in 2010, he announced he wasn't going to seek re-election. He was done, and he's disappeared other than doing some lobbying and whatnot. But he came on my morning show, and we talked about we were still trying to recover from the collapse, savings and loans collapse and all this other stuff in 2008, 2009. And he mentioned that, it's time for government to kind of change the way it does business, because they could no longer afford to keep going down the path it was going. And I said, I made some kind of a doubtful comment to him. I said, I think something along the lines of you're trampling on sacred ground here. And he said to me, sacred ground has become shifting sands.
Correct. That's a great line.
Yeah, it was a great line. And I said, ooh, he's onto something.
Yeah.
Of course, that was in 2010.
Yeah.
We've been through a bunch of stuff since then. We've been through a COVID pandemic, which I was sure it absolutely halted the economy 100%. I'm like, this will be what will turn it around. And it didn't. They just kept printing money, and government just kept spending money like drunken sailors on shore leave. And everybody opened a bar and took advantage of that money. Right?
Yeah.
You're offering the same warning. Why are you gonna finally validate former State Senator 𝐉𝐨𝐞 𝐌𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐞 and do away with my cynicism?
The writing is on the wall, Teddy. The writing, we can't have it any clearer. Like I said to you when I was last here, and I said to you, people need to pay attention about what's going on in the federal government, because what goes on in the federal government trickles down into our community quicker than people think. And I'd given the example of the police clinicians, the social workers that the police were able to hire through DMH and through federal funding, right? What happened this week? What happened this past week? President Trump is saying that funding, a lot of funding for a lot of these social service agencies and a lot of these kind of human agencies and, to help people in areas outside of kind of strict, what we would traditionally, back in the day when we were young and growing up in like the Reagan era, what we would consider strict government funding has been expanded to such a great extent that now he's pulling it back, which we knew he was going to.
And I got to give you props. You did predict it. Go back, folks, 2 weeks ago from today, the 31st, so that would be the 17th. The Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, you said there's changes in D.C. are going to trickle down, and you specifically cited that
and guess what's happening? That's exactly what's happening. And then he just announced he offered a retirement incentive to 2 million federal employees. What happens when we start cutting the workforce at the federal level, right? It trickles down. If you read, I think it was a Forbes article, I want to say it was yesterday, where they're talking about when you do federal cuts at that level, how it impacts private companies with federal contracts, right? So we have to wake up. And I'm the first to say, when I'm uncomfortable with something, I bury my head in the sand and I say, I just don't understand it, and I wait for someone else to figure it out, because that's the easiest way to do it. But at some point, you have to learn what you need to learn to take care of yourself. And I think, if I could give one kind of indicator or one warning to anyone listening, is take care of your house right now. Take care of your own house right now. Do not rely, as much as you can, do not rely on exterior forces, because they might not be there. If you're somehow getting federal assistance right now, try to figure out your life without that federal assistance, because President Trump is clearly saying it might not be there anymore. And Governor Healey is reading the writing on the wall and also pulling back.
We're going to get to Governor Healey in a few seconds. So, but, I mean, that is so very true. I do not disagree with you. And, people, start putting some money away in savings. I'm first and foremost. That's something I have to start doing, because you're at some point, the whole house of cards crumbles. You can't have a federal budget that pays $1 trillion a year on interest on the debt, and not at some point either lead to such sky-high inflation and interest rates as we've had. That hits you. So all the aid the government sent us, all those COVID, stimulus checks and whatnot, got eaten up every time you go to the grocery store, and then some, right? So, people do need to wake up to it. I'm just cynical if it's all going to have to collapse like it did in my parents' homeland of Greece when the Germans put the austerity measures in on them. Someone's going to have to put some austerity measures in here, or as you said, we're going to have to change our ways.
Well, and I think that's what's being asked of us. And when you say about COVID, I think during the pandemic, I think there had been a hope that was going to be not only, I mean, COVID was crazy. COVID is one of those things, when we think back to the pandemic for the rest of our lives, we are going to have stories about how all of a sudden the world shut down. You know, and we were teaching our kids in their bedrooms, and we were doing our jobs. I was attending court from my dining room table for over a year. You know, so that is something that I would hope is never going to happen again in our lifetimes. I don't think anyone could have ever predicted it, but the reality is that could have been the reset that we needed, and it wasn't.
It should have been.
It should have been.
You're right.
It was not. And it wasn't, right? So now we're in post-COVID, and we're still dealing with post-COVID issues, I think, that have impacted other areas. And now we have a president who's saying, hey, folks, guess what? I'm about to push the button on that reset. Everybody get ready. And there's not much you have all the politicians saying, well, he can't do that. He doesn't have the right to do that. Guess what we learned the last time he was president? He doesn't really care what we tell him he has the right to do, right? Whether you like him or hate him, the reality is he's now in the driver's seat, and we have to prepare for that. And that's what, I'm not trying to be doomsday. I'm not trying to, say everyone should be super worried, but we should be cautious. And if you're not in a position that you can take care of yourself right now, you should start trying to look for non-government ways to fix that.
See, I'm optimistic about it. I'm thinking the moment has finally come, and we get the guy who doesn't give a what anymore, and will do it. And he's far more organized, so he could be effective if he sticks to it.
Yeah.
But it will affect the way we do business. So as you looked at that Tewksbury budget, did Rich Montori / John Curran, did they account for this? Are they starting to plan ahead?
So the budget as presented was there was nothing surprising in it. We're expecting level funding from the state. That's probably what we're going to end up getting. We're covering all our bases. I think the two areas that I am interested in exploring more through the Finance Committee and kind of through these next few months as the budget is being explored is the schools component always, because the Shawshene Tech is looming, and that's another thing that I don't think anyone who is in the Shawshene Tech district, Bedford, Burlington, Wilmington, Tewksbury, I feel like I'm missing, and Billerica, we need to be proactive in the idea that they're going to build a new school there, and that's going to be a big assessment on the towns that are in that district, and we can't just wait. Like right now, like
people in Tewksbury in those towns, go look at the cost of school.
Correct.
Like $400 million in Lowell,
Correct.
$400 million in Waltham.
Yep.
Take a look around you. And this is a tech school, which usually those are more expensive, right? By the square foot, because they've got all this, high-tech technology in there.
And the assessments are already going up. I think Tewksbury had increased like another 8% from last year to this year, what Tewksbury has to pay for the tech. And that's before this new school is even a possibility. And I think John Curran was one who said, like, I'm asking them to give us an idea, and we don't want to wait. We want to kind of be able to prepare. And I think that's the right move, is we're not waiting, tell us what your plan is so that we can at least anticipate the worst case scenario, because that's a lot easier for us to do, to try to figure out how we're going to come up with it, than having that assessment already levied on us. And then we're scrambling to try to meet our obligations. So I think that's one of them. The second one is the trash, which I think is hysterical, because when I was on the Wilmington Select Board, I didn't understand the complexities of trash, and now I'm very respectful of how complicated that can be. When recycling was first a thing, towns were making money on the recycling, hand over fist.
It was going to save us, save the world.
Now it costs us. That's the biggest expense.
Is there anybody in Tewksbury that has kind of my mentality, saying, can we just go back to throwing it all in the same
No, oh my
place?
God. My husband would be so upset. It might save money, but what's it going to do to us long term? I mean, that's, at the end of the day, do you care about your grandchildren living on a landfill?
I do, and I know that we can't get rid of this garbage now, so we're just pouring it into the oceans anyway.
Well, I mean, I will say for trash, what I learned in Wilmington is, it's a business. Solid waste is a business, recycling is a business. And I think what needs to happen is there's an almost, and I don't want to say it's a true monopoly because I don't think those are legal, but there's this almost monopoly on these larger companies that are traveling with the trash long distances to these transfer stations. And I think that's jacking up the prices, fuel prices, et cetera. And I think we need to find more local options. And again, that's not a unique Tewksbury thing, but I know that's one of the budget items that garnered attention from James Mackey, one of the select board members, and I think is kind of something year over year as it increases, we have to figure out a different way to deal with it.
Isn't there a center in Billerica where trash is kind of taken from this entire area? So John Curran is probably at least he's somebody well equipped to know that.
He says he's meeting with Republic next week, so again, he said all the right things. You know, like I didn't end that YouTube, of the select board meeting and was concerned with the hands that we're in now, because quite frankly, he's working off of Richard Montouri's budget for this coming year. He was saying all the right things. He's planning on meeting with the right people. I think the big tell is going to be a year from now when it's his budget with a brand new assistant town manager. Where are we at? Because he said it's going to, 2027, 2028, that's when I think we're really going to feel it in a lot of different ways. Our taxes are only going up. I think he said the average homeowner is going to go up like $230, which is pretty standard. Over the last 4 years, it's gone up around that amount. So there's no surprises, but I think this is our wake up call to say, okay, pay attention, because change is coming. Tighten the belts now, because they're going to get tightened for us whether we want them to or not.
Right, and you said that the budget is basically assuming level funding from the state. Is the Tewksbury budget level funded? Because you've got pre-signed contracts, I assume, whether it's teachers, fire, police, or whatever, that are going up X%.
Yep, there's a lot of COLA increases.
Inflation, the rate of inflation's growth has slowed down, but inflation is still pouring into people's budgets. So how are they going to make up that shortfall between level funding from the state and the fact that Tewksbury has to increase funding?
So the way that the budget's been presented is it is all level funded. It's all, there's no surprises, where there's no, overrides being requested. There's we're okay.
So cuts
for the moment. I don't believe there's any real cuts, but I do think, again, one of the concerns is they just renegotiated, the teachers' contracts finally got renegotiated. Public safety, they just finalize those contracts. And I think they're just COLA, like, again, if from what I'm remembering from the public safety contracts, they're basically COLA increases. There's nothing, significant. They're just trying to give them, basic cost of living increases. But the reality is, we're going into Market Basket right now where there's signs saying because of the egg situation, only 2 cartons per family. That's only going to get worse. COLA is not going to be enough. And this year, we're fine. This year, it's okay. No one needs to worry this year. Everyone should be worried what happens after this year. And again, it trickles down. It's not just the town of Tewksbury. It's when the state funding is cut to Tewksbury and the federal funding is cut to the state, who ultimately is going to end up having to deal with it.
But so you're savvy on this. So isn't that kind of irresponsible to do the budget the way it was done this year? Because you're saying next year's when it's going to really hit the fan, but this year's budget affects next year's budget. So wouldn't the time to make the adjustments is start doing them now in this fiscal year so that it's not as bad the next time?
I think the hope is, and like it's just as an example, Pat Holland, the chair of the select board, one of the questions he had was about the hotels tax, that it seems like it's decreasing. Is it because the state's not meeting their obligations to pay us for the space that they're utilizing currently?
Yeah, there's nobody staying in hotels except migrants, so the state's not going to tax itself.
Correct. Well, but they're obligated to. But if you look at the budget, it actually, it was $1 million 2 years ago. We got 900 and something this past year, and Richard had projected about 500 because one of the hotels in Tewksbury is converted to private housing, and there's another hotel being built, but it might not be done in time for that projection. So those are the types of things that I think we kind of have an asterisk on, that hopefully it's going to help us. But I think that's why ultimately, the big ticket kind of speaking point of this, and it was said again, everyone said it the right way at the meeting as they were told to, is economic development is going to be super important. That at some point soon, very soon, we can't rely on the homeowners, the taxpayers, to be getting all of this, to shoulder all this burden. Can't just be on the individual taxpayer. And again, I think there's a lot that's going to be done. I mean, President Trump, what is the name of the department that he created that Elon Musk is the head of?
DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency.
Efficiency. I knew efficiency was in there, right? So, he's going after excess jobs that he thinks are unnecessary, things like that. And I've already said how I think that's going to trickle down to us. But I think one of the things that we need to focus on and be conscious of is our own efficiencies within, we have so much vacant commercial property right now in Tewksbury. And we have the Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce, which is smaller, And I'm not sure how much they actually do to recruit new businesses in versus just supporting the existing businesses. And then we have the Greater Lowell Chamber of Commerce that we also have members of in Tewksbury. Danielle is phenomenal, you know, and I'm trying to get her on for my Inside Tewksbury with the Economic Development Director, Alex Louder in Tewksbury, because I think this is an important focus. When we're talking about tightening our budgets and when we're talking about, you know, getting your house in order, I think as a at the community level, the next step of that is let's responsibly fill what already exists. And in Tewksbury, there is already commercial property that's been vacant. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's vacant is because it's more beneficial to the landlord to keep it vacant as a tax write-off than to try to get it filled with a tenant, right? Which is fine for that individual landlord, but not so great for the town, because we're not getting any revenue. We're not getting any business tax from it, right?
And COVID kind of changed the game, that as long as when they figured out, well, people don't necessarily have to go to work every day or whatever.
Just go in your basement.
We haven't gone back, but now you're seeing some of the spin-off of that. You have vacant commercial properties, no need to fill them, no incentive to fill them either in some cases. And how is Tewksbury? Every single town says this. We're saying it here in Lowell. Yeah. We're excited. You know, we think we're going to steal everybody's business from surrounding areas because of the Link project at UMass Lowell or this front runner city stuff. Well, you're competing against Lowell, against Andover, against Billerica, Chelmsford, et cetera. And we're all competing against Boston, Cambridge, et cetera. So, you know, good luck in this current economic environment.
Right. But I think Danielle has a great approach. The Greater Lowell Chamber has a great approach, because what they're basically doing, what she's basically doing, my understanding is, like, if there is an opportunity that is presented to Lowell and it's maybe not a great fit to Lowell, she's not just letting it go. She's shopping it out. You know what I mean? And I think Tewksbury needs to capitalize on that, because she's a great resource. The Greater Lowell Chamber is a great resource, that if something isn't the right fit exactly for a space in Lowell, there's probably a space in Tewksbury that it would make sense for it to be in, right?
And I think the Greater Lowell Chamber, so they are
and I think
a ton of time.
And she has some great ideas about, you know, pop-up events to try to get people into the spaces more. I honestly think one of my questions for her, and one of the things I think is going to be the next step for things like chambers of commerce. Historically, chambers of commerce tend to focus on attracting businesses, right? And generating more business in town. Why? Because we get the revenue, and that is important. The tax revenue. When you have more businesses, you get more tax revenue. You're not relying on the taxpayers anymore. You kind of are diversifying it to an organization or an agency. With this federal potential federal employee cut, what I think we're going to need is some type of job fair component, right? We have, again, COVID. What did COVID teach some people? Stay at home and you're going to make more money. Stay at home and the money's coming to you and you don't need to work, right? And that's a mentality that for many years prior to COVID, there were people that, you know, I listen to some of these podcasts, these financial planning podcasts, just to try to learn more. And you have people saying, I didn't get a job because if I start working more than, 10 hours a week, I lose my benefits, right? That's a common mentality. When people get themselves in a situation, it takes a long time sometimes to get approvals for these subsidies and get approvals for these benefits that people are getting, right? Disability. Anyone who's on disability knows you don't usually get it the first time around. You get denied, you have to fight it. It takes a long time, right? So when you're finally on it, you're doing everything you can not to jeopardize it. Even if that means you're keeping yourself out of the workforce and you're not utilizing your skills and your abilities to actually, and I think with the potential freeze and with kind of the nature of what we see happening, people are going to have to change that mindset. And that's where things like the Chamber of Commerce and economic development, we're not just focusing on attracting more businesses, we need to attract people back into the workforce. And I think that's gonna save us.
See, I have a theory about that problem that you talked about. You got to incentivize people to get back to work. So when I run for office, my wife's gonna kill me. She told me she'd avoid me if I ever run for office.
I was gonna say, is this like are you making a big announcement right now?
God, no. I can do more damage behind a microphone than in a government office. But, how much money do we spend on health care for people not to work? And you're right. Yeah. Why would I give up my health care if I'm getting it covered? And along with that, I'm getting some other things that when I, instead of going out and working a job that's not going to pay all that much and I'll be struggling to make ends meet. How about that health care money, the state health money, Mass Health? How about that gets put into the hands of employers? Or, don't put it in our control, but say, if you work, we'll cover, we'll cover. This is how you get your Mass Health. You got to put in 30 hours a week somewhere. That will help people fill jobs. That will help people Get out of the house. And the other spin-off to that is the disappearance of the office and the commercial building and whatnot is hurting small business. The mom and pop coffee shops that were built around these big office buildings in Boston, these vacant areas. And right, I'm sure all these areas that are vacant in Tewksbury have some kind of restaurant or coffee shop or, I don't know, convenience store that was open specifically to cater to that business. So there's a huge spin-off effect. But, you know, I like the way you think.
Oh, well, thank you.
I like the way you think.
I appreciate that.
Jomarie Buckley is joining us here in the WellPoint studios. It's the Friday, January 31st edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, brought to you by Real Estate 𝐉𝐨𝐿, licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states. Find them online at realestateravebooten.com. Of course, we're coming here from the WellPoint studios. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thank you as well to our friends at Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. Great organization, better people. Got to get them on one day to talk about some of the stuff they do behind the scenes and the family story there. Thank you as well to the newest member of the Inside Lowell family, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in Greater Lowell through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell has counted on since 1982, and by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Tsongas Center in downtown Lowell. With that, we turn back to Jomarie Buckley from Tewksbury Together.
Yes.
Also the host of the Inside Tewksbury podcast here at Inside Lowell and a regular contributor to the Daily Pulse. Now, I'm dragging her in there because I like people who don't hold back. Every time we've talked, we've talked about Tewksbury State Hospital, and you serve on the board. You're very defensive of its reputation, of everybody else's desire, including those of us here in Lowell, of just send everybody to Tewksbury, expand Tewksbury and whatnot. It makes the hair on your spine.
Well, it needs to be a thoughtful process. It can't just be keep sending them our way.
But we all agree that there is a mental health crisis,
right? My gosh,
exacerbated by COVID, right? The isolation, especially with the kids stuff. So it was interesting to see Governor Healey's most recent budget, wasn't it?
Yes.
Forget expanding Tewksbury. I'm concerned she might shut it down. She's shutting down a couple of mental health facilities. Now, they say they've got a plan to relocate those people to other facilities. But besides that, and I'm getting this from the WBUR story, Healey also intends to significantly slash the state's mental health case manager workforce. And the closings and staff cuts are drawing a strong backlash from critics who predict, quote, severe consequences, end quote, in healthcare. Healey's budget calls for reducing the volume of mental health department case managers from 340 to 170, according to the Health and Human Services Office. She's slashing the number of case managers, mental health case managers, in the midst of a mental health crisis that everybody is acknowledging. She's slashing that number in half. What a horrific place. There's got to be somewhere else to slash. I can suggest a few places, but I'll let you tell me. But B, doesn't that tell us what a disaster the state budget is right now?
And again, this is what I said to you.
That fiscal cliff we were heading to,
we're there.
It is right here. She knows we have a mental health crisis. She talks about it every week.
We have a lot of crises. I think that's the problem, where the problem of this is that I think this is reactionary to, again, what's going on in the federal government. I think this was a shoot from the hip. Where can I attack first? And I think it's probably not the appropriate place. And I will say this, right? It's easy. We would love to be able to create buckets and just say, okay, mental health is over here. Undocumented migrants are over here. People with addiction issues are over here, right? So, hey, we're only talking about mental health. We're not talking about mental health because mental health touches all the other buckets. You know,
a lot of those folks coming over have mental health issues because of the place that they were coming from. So whatever you think of them, that's That's the truth.
Here's the soundbite of my controversial statement for this. Ready? Not down the time. Jot down the time. Undocumented migrants, right? When we talk about undocumented migrants, they are undocumented for a reason, right? I listened recently, Nikki Haley did a podcast with someone from the Dave Ramsey show, Ken Coleman, and she talked about, that's the third rail no one wants to talk about, is when it's undocumented and somehow that's a special status. The reality is here in the United States, as has always been the case, there is a mechanism for people to come from another country and become a citizen here and to live here, documented, right? If someone's coming here and they're undocumented, it begs the question, why can't they legally apply to be a citizen here, right? What are the barriers to them of being able to be a documented citizen? And one of the barriers, if I had to anticipate and guess, is that they have a mental health issue or they have something in their past that would be unsavory for the United States, immigration to know about, right? And I'm not saying that, again, I'm not saying every undocumented migrant here in the United States is a criminal. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that everyone who's here undocumented has a mental health issue, but I am saying that when you have someone who is not willing to go through the legalization process, you have to evaluate why. Right? And I would suggest that the why is probably in these other buckets that we're talking about. So that's why I don't understand why we're not looking at that first. Because I think if you're addressing that component and and then we can look at the resources available to our citizens and the people who are here, then we can decide what is needed. And I think, again, President Trump's going to force that to be the issue, whether we want it to be or not. And I am not.
You're not going to have people being flown into Logan Airport, sleeping on tarmac, not tarmac, but inside the lobbies on the floors until they can find an emergency shelter for them, and then eventually go out into an already lacking affordable housing situation.
Correct. We're not going to have shelter systems anymore that will allow for that, right? We're not.
Donald's doing Maura Healey a favor.
I don't know if she feels that way. But I think when we look at things like this, when we look at the cuts, and I will also, DMH case managers are the front line for the mental health crisis. So to cut them, you're basically saying is I'm eliminating those troops that are on the line. And I'm not sure that that's a great idea, because when they breach the line, what happens? We have to have other systems trying to deal with them, right? Cutting half the case managers for the Department of Mental Health is not somehow addressing the people who need mental health services. We're actually making it that much more difficult for them, right? And I think that's what again, I think I said this previously when we talked about the state hospital, that they're doing amazing work with nothing. They're going to have even less soon, I'm sure. And the programs that are on their campus that are not state hospital programs, but they're tenants that are like sober houses and other types that rely on state and federal funding. Once they're gone, what is that going to do? Those people don't magically get cured, right? If you cut a program, it doesn't mean that people are healed. It means we have to find another place for them. And it kind of, I'm getting it again on a huge soapbox now by saying this, when we were growing up, Teddy, and we were in school, our teachers were there to teach us, correct? Right? They were there to teach us the academic things that we needed to learn. Teachers nowadays are expected to be the social workers for the kids, the case managers for whatever they might need at home, security in some cases now when we have these Alice drills and all this other stuff.
They're expected to be the mother and father figures of these
teaching,
kids in many cases.
Academics of teaching is probably 4th or 5th on the priority list nowadays. I can't imagine. My mother is a retired public school teacher. I hold teachers in such high regard. I can't imagine if one of my kids said they wanted to be a teacher, I would be really concerned, because it's not teaching anymore. It's teaching social work, security, and all these other things. And I think that's what they're trying to do in other areas as well, right? We have psychiatric nurses who need to be nurses to these patients who are also having to learn how to be security. Right. We eliminating case managers.
So they're not getting attacked.
Right. So you're eliminating the case managers. Who's going to take over that role to try to help them find the resources? Who are you going to identify that's going to help these people find the services that they need? Because they clearly can't do it on their own, right? We can't expect them to do it on their own, and we're eliminating the people that are going to help them. So whose shoulders is that going to fall on? And my concern always remains that it's going to somehow fall on the people who aren't prepared for it. And then we're going to be like, look, they can't handle it. How come they can't handle it? They weren't trained to do it. They didn't sign up for that job. And now they're being asked to do it. So I'm really curious. I mean, the 2 facilities that are referenced are smaller facilities. So I'm not, to me, it's like, okay, she's trying to consolidate resources, but where are they going? Because if they're coming to Tewksbury State Hospital, I can say we probably don't, we're at capacity. I don't think we have space for them. And I would love to see, again, in kind of in a purple colored sky world, that as these things are happening, it's because places like Tewksbury State Hospital, which is one of the only 2 that are dual in the state, DPH and DMH, because they're going to put more money and resources into them. Because they're going to say, hey, listen, we're about to burden you more, but we're going to give you better resources. We're going to build you better facilities, and we're going to allow you more staff. That's not what's going to happen.
Yeah, good luck finding the resources.
Right. That's not going to happen.
The caseworkers. We mentioned Tewksbury Together,
yes.
your nonprofit organization, which promotes things. You did a wonderful Christmas.
Yes.
You called it a Winterfest.
Winterfest,
right before
the
Christmas,
holidays.
And you got a bunch of stuff planned for 2025.
Yes.
Did you lose your shit and start posting on social media like all these other nonprofit agencies about that orange-haired ogre in DC cutting their fundings?
My husband might tell you differently. I very rarely lose my shit for any reason. And my social media posts are usually pictures of my cute animals, my not so cute children.
Your social media is kind of boring. You got to step it up a little.
No, that's on purpose.
So you're not concerned. Your nonprofit organization.
No. My nonprofit organization does not rely on any government.
You don't have 6-figure executive directors or directors of development or community outreach advocates. You don't have a whole level of bureaucracy set up.
We have 4 hardworking board members and a small army of volunteers that we're trying to grow. Right. And we don't, it's not, whatever's happening in the world, we're just there to help support. And again, here's another soapbox thing, Teddy. Write this down too, because this could be another good sound.
All right, here I go.
So one of the things when we were talking about kind of when people are relying on government subsidies and people are relying on government assistance, right? We do it on a small measure, and I think there's going to come a time where we're going to need to do it on a larger measure. I challenge that there's no one in this world, no matter what is going on with their condition, with their situation, that they can't find time to do some small thing to help better the community around them, right? And I know we offer it, like there's some senior, like small subsidies in some towns that if seniors do a certain number of volunteer hours, they get a little cut on their taxes, things like that. I think as we're dealing with this, it would be great to see an emergence of more of that. You know what? You want to collect some type of subsidy? Volunteer 10 hours a week doing this. You want this? Do that. Like Tewksbury used to have twice a year. They used to have town cleanup day.
Making so much sense.
Listen, it's what I do. It's a good thing no one knows who I am, or I'd be lethal.
But if they take all the time to do that, to eradicate some of these problems that their mission statement says, then who's going to register people to vote or advocate for the millionaire's tax or other things?
We can fit that in. We can fit that in. What I'm saying is, here's an example. Tewksbury used to have twice a year town cleanup day. They've now made it once a year because they don't have enough volunteers, right? There's not enough people in Tewksbury that care enough to walk around their neighborhood to clean up trash, right? And I say this in judgment because I've been doing it since I've been a Tewksbury resident. My husband and I, and when my kids are with us, we do the same area of Tewksbury. We'll do cleanup, right? I can't imagine that people, unless there's a severe reason why someone can't put on that yellow vest and they can't spend a few hours picking up trash to help offset the fact that they're getting all of this assistance.
We have a Lowell litter crew, a nonprofit specifically that does that, goes out and cleans up a park or whatever.
I'm not throwing shade, but the parts of the canal I walk by, they're not doing a great job.
Well, they're busy with other things too at times, but State Rep Vanna Howard, who's got part of Tewksbury, by the way, is very front and center in that group. But so how did you feel when you saw all these NGOs, these non-government organizations? I put non-government in quotes because they lost their mind when the president announced funding. Now, if you're not a government organization, why would you be affected by a federal funding freeze?
I don't know why you would, but
in other words, these non-government organizations are just a little sidebar of bureaucracy.
They could be
set up here that is getting government money to go out and do things that either government or private people.
They could be under government grants. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that it could still be affecting them, and I get it. And it could also be the panic of, wait, the sister agency that is a government agency, right? There's a lot of nonprofits that, even though they're not governmental and they're not public, they still have affiliations with a public nonprofit or a governmental nonprofit. And all of a sudden, if you're seeing, wait a minute, like they're about to be in big trouble, so we're about to get bombarded. And I think that was probably part of the panic, is we don't have the capacity to get the overflow that's about to be heading our way.
I'll agree. Maybe, again, I would, hate to see anybody lose their job.
You saying you agree with me, Teddy, I want that to be, whenever my phone rings, I want to hear your voice saying I agree.
You do not want that. You don't want anybody knowing that I agree with you or that you agree with me. Some feedback. I just want to get, we always encourage people to leave their feedback on our YouTube channel, on Facebook. We got some feedback from our show yesterday where I was having a little fun with the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. hearings. What did you think of that, by the way?
I have no idea.
You didn't watch?
Nope.
Oh,
nope.
Great. When they were talking about onesies, I mean,
no, I purposefully stayed away. The only thing I know about it is what my husband would tell me a little bit, and as he would tell you, I only half listen sometimes when it comes to these things.
So do you know that you can get Vegas odds, or not Vegas, but gambling sites give odds on whether these nominations will get approved. Robert F. Kennedy has now skyrocketed up into the 90 percentile thing. Tulsi Gabbard, after her day of testimony yesterday, went from 22% likely to get approved. She's now at 49%.
Oh, good for her.
So she must have done well. It was great to see people hating on diverse people, though. Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard. I thought everybody was upset that we were losing DEI. Anyway, Ellen from Lowell says, some people say Caroline Kennedy, is bashing her cousin because she's invested in Pfizer, Merck, and others. And he talks about banning vaccines, which is big money. I'm not sure if he is the right pick, but he certainly has changed his life from all those decades ago.
I agree with that statement.
A little bit of some folks don't like change.
No,
the change we talked about at the beginning of this podcast.
No.
Because you lose your little fiefdom, you lose your little money train. Gail Ann says, because I asked the question, I said, were Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, sharp exchanges with Robert F. Kennedy due to their desire to improve public health, maintain public health, or their desire to maintain the big pharma's profit margins? Gail Ann says, follow the money trail for sure. Warren and Bernie make millions from the drug companies. On the other end of the spectrum, Joe says, the best way to tell who is in the pocket of big pharma versus who is interested in public health is to look at who does and does not support laws about drug price negotiations. If you're really interested in public health and not too concerned with drug company profits, you want pharmaceuticals to be available to the people who need them regardless of wealth, even if that means the companies make less money. If you're interested in the drug company's profits, you're going to want them to be able to keep drug prices high and oppose the price negotiations. So Joe and I very rarely agree. I mean, he's got somewhat of a point there, but I'm always hesitant when I hear, basically we're talking about price controls.
Right.
Price controls ever work? Do we have an example of price controls working? Rent control, any other control?
I mean, I think they work in the short term. I don't think we've ever had an example of them working in the long term. They usually have the opposite effect of what allegedly we're hoping.
So when we talk about healthcare, what was the point of Obamacare? It's going to make healthcare affordable for everybody.
Daddy.
It made
my mother's never going to listen to this again.
Look, we're 15 years into that social experiment now, right?
Yeah.
And has healthcare gotten better?
No.
As a matter of fact, if you're happy with your health care, chances are you are unhappy with it now. Can't get a doctor's appointment for 3 to 6 months, right? People with serious cardiac conditions can't get an appointment.
Yep.
Emergency room waits. And by the way, look at your health insurance.
Right.
Now, it's affordable for some of the folks who aren't paying for it.
Like I say, use the quotes again for that.
It may not be great insurance, but it's better than no insurance at all, and they're not paying for it. But if you're a working person or you've got a private plan, how's Obamacare worked out for you? Sorry.
Sorry, Mom.
Sorry to Jomarie's mom, but I mean, let's ask ourselves that question. I won't drag you into the DC plane crash because unless you want to be dragged into it.
No, tell me what because my husband was just talking about this. If it's the plane crash, is this the helicopter hitting
the helicopter, the plane crashing?
What do you want to say about it?
Well, everybody's all upset now because the president yesterday started blaming the DEI hiring policies and the focus in D.C.
that's what my husband was telling me
for
this
it.
morning.
And some people are aghast that the president would politicize it in a time of tragedy. It's funny because I went back on some of those people's social media feeds, and whenever somebody gets shot, they immediately politicize it and want gun control. So, I mean, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander.
Is it true that there were 2 other attempts? There were 2 other aircrafts that she was trying to, they were trying to hit prior to that strike? Or is that conspiracy theory?
I've seen so much conspiracy stuff out there. From what I can gather, it was human error. It was an accident. There was what is being reported widely is that there was one air traffic controller who was doing the job that normally 2 people would do on that night. That airport supposedly is very difficult to fly in and out of because of all the activity. It appears that somebody screwed up. Well, and why they screwed up? Were they competent in that role? Were they we'll find out soon enough, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to politicize. And
if I were the families of the victims, I don't care if it's politicized or not. I want to get to the bottom of it. So whoever's going to put a spotlight on the truth, go for it.
Well, we shall find out. I wanted to end with a study that somebody pointed. Well, we talked about COVID, right, and how it changed the world, and you talked about schools, and a study was released just recently, although the study was conducted in 2021. I don't know why it took 4 years to release it. But it was a study of Montreal schools. Montreal schools, and whether some of these air quality mitigation measures worked. I'm going to read you the conclusion. Our findings show no positive association between COVID-19 incident rates among school attendees and CO2 concentrations. They went into some of the measures they use. They talk about whatever, and it says it aligns with other studies examining CO2 and COVID-19 transmission, suggesting that ventilation may have limited impact beyond a certain threshold, which likely varies for different aerosol-transmitted infections. And it concludes there were probably other factors that caused rising or lower COVID transmission rates in schools, such as what's going on in the neighborhoods in those individual cities and towns. But so here in Lowell, the teachers' unions refused to go back to work. Until A, we were safe from COVID. And B, you had to do something about the air quality. So the city of Lowell went out and paid a shitload of money
for air purifiers.
Which apparently, according to this study and others,
I feel like I'm being punked right now.
Made absolutely no difference. But
here's the study I would like to know. Why did my children who were in third grade and 6th grade in COVID, they're now in high school and they still basically can't read or write? Like, can we focus on that's the study I would like to hear about? I don't care about the air quality study. I care about my senior in high school's college essay basically being illegible on all levels and having to be rewritten.
You do a better job.
I care about my freshman in high school who still refuses to read a full book. Who's still looking for an audiobook because she doesn't like reading because the years of formative reading she spent in her bedroom on a Zoom.
The long-term effects, and again, go back to that mental health discussion. We've got a long way to go. We're celebrating here in Massachusetts. We actually rank #1 in the recent testing, both for reading and arithmetic.
I think that bar is low.
But right. So even though we rank #1, we're still deteriorating, as is the country.
And that's completely, I guess, shade on myself because I was homeschooling them. My son failed band. All he had to do is make a video of himself hitting a drum for a minute, and he failed. So
how do you do in gym?
They had to keep a fitness log that we would just lie about every week. How many steps did you do, buddy? You did. Let's see. How many times did you go from your bedroom to the kitchen? But that's the study. I don't care about air quality. Tell me how my kids are going to get smarter.
And that's where I want to end it in my editorial for today, even though I've editorialized the whole 40-plus minute
I gave you a lot of good sound bites today, Teddy. You're welcome.
You did. And I actually took a note. Usually I'm scrambling. Where did he or she say this and that? So I can do my little tease. You told me, so I marked it down. But as we look to try to solve the youth mental health crisis,
Yes.
as we look to try to solve the education crisis.
Yes.
My advice to folks is, don't listen to the people who got it all wrong in 2020, 2021, and continue to try to milk that for as long as possible, right? The ones that sent your kids to school in masks and put air purifiers in there and had them stand 6 feet apart so that they could, which now Dr. Fauci has acknowledged, we just kind of pulled that out of our ass. But let's focus on the future and solving some of the issues, and let's have a little less faith in the people who screwed it up in 2020, and maybe listen a little bit more to the people who tried to speak up in 2020 and we either ignored or outright silenced.
Well, and I think this is the advice that I give to all new parents. Whenever someone, a nice, happy pregnant woman who still hasn't felt the realities of motherhood, listen to your gut. You know what I mean? And I won't get on the soapbox of what you just said. I will tell you that I did not want my children to get the COVID vaccine. My 2 oldest kids got it because they had to for college. My youngest 2 kids, I did
You're
not.
A very smart mom.
Well, and the reason.
Your kids will thank you.
The reason, very pointedly, the reason is because there's a history of heart issues in my family and my ex-husband's family. There's a history of infertility issues in my family and my ex-husband's family. And those were the 2 big things that were being discussed as long-term effects for pediatric COVID vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, there's no reason for them to get it. They didn't. We were in a bubble. We didn't. My mom was the senior citizen of the family. We were protecting her. We were in a bubble. So it wasn't a political stance. It was, as a mother, my gut said, we need to wait out. We can't let them be the guinea pigs of a new vaccine, right? Listen to your gut. You were going to be, as a parent, you were going to be told millions of different pieces of advice. Teddy just gave his. I'm giving mine. Follow the advice that makes the most sense for you and your family, right? And that's all we can do. So if someone's telling you that you have to do something for a reason and you don't believe that's the right reason for you and your family, challenge it. Again, getting back to my original statement.
Question authority? We
can't be the sheep anymore. We need to start being, whether it's the wolves, whether it's whatever it is, we need to start being at the head of the pack in this decision making and not being so reactive and just following what we're being told to do. That is what, if for no other reason, that is what the world is telling us right now we need to do, right? We are citizens of the United States with a president who very clearly bucks the system when he doesn't believe in the system. Whether you like that or not, I'm not saying I'm pro-Trump or I'm against Trump. What I'm saying is...
One of these days I'm going to force you to say it.
You'll never get me to say it. You'll never get me to say it. They tried on CAP, never going to happen. But the reality is now is the time that you need to learn what you need to learn. You need to go to the source of what you need to learn. Like, don't rely on this podcast to tell you what you need to go to the source itself, right? Don't rely on podcasts. Don't rely on, other people's recitation of what they believe the facts are. Try to get to the actual source of the information. Learn it. Take the time. Action is what needs to happen. When you have fear, most people who are feeling fear have 2 choices, right? Inaction, they go and bury their heads and they try to hide and they try to dodge the bullet, or action. They grab arms and they try to fight back, right? Now is the time for action. That's my rally cry for Inside Lowell on a Friday.
Question it. I love it. This is why we get along. Science that can't be questioned is propaganda.
Right.
Jomarie, by the way, that last little segment of yours, guaranteed to get a little YouTube note on this video. So no, I'm trying to do it because it makes me more legit. As soon as YouTube questions that, I'm on the right track.
There you go.
Jomarie Buckley, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for helping ease my confidence. 2 straight days I had people blow me off the morning.
I won't say I didn't think about it.
Yeah, my wife said, "Are they sick of you already?" No, I'm like, "No, Jomarie's going to come in and watch," and she did.
I did.
All right, thanks for not holding back. Thanks for keeping us up to date on what's happening in Tewksbury.
Absolutely.
We're going to start watching that town, and we'll get you. We got to get you and Danielle in here to do a podcast without me about Tewksbury economic development and whatnot.
That would be great.
All right, and we'll have you back in a few weeks, all right?
All right.
Thank you, Jomarie. Thank all of you for watching us as well on this Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Friday, January 31st edition of the Pulse. Next time we come to you, it'll be February. 1/12 of the year is gone. 1/48 of Donald Trump's term will be gone for those of you who who are having a hard time dealing with it. Yep, we only have 47 more months
Oh my God.
to deal. I actually did the day count on my Twitter feed earlier this morning. Yeah, I know, I'm a dick. I still know how to piss people off. Everybody, have yourself a great weekend. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll catch you with another edition of the Daily Pulse on Monday morning.